I will listen sometimes to somebody complain that their record they set in single ply was beat by somebody wearing multi-ply. But they forget the record they set in single ply beat somebody.
Get the fuck up. Simon says, get the fuck up. Throw your hands in the sky.
What does an elite total mean to you now as opposed to when you were trying to total elite, and how has your perception changed? I got in the sport in '83, and the elite total was, they haven't changed. So like 220 was 1820, and I think that was the first elite that I got. And then 242 was 1945 maybe. I could be screwing them up a little bit. Maybe 275 was 1945. But anyhow, it hasn't, my perception really hasn't changed, because when I came into the sport, there wasn't multi-ply gear, it was single-ply gear. We got a carryover out of it. I'm not gonna sit here and say we didn't get anything out of it. I got something out of it, but maybe between wraps and the suit at best, I might've got 100 pounds on the squat. If the suit didn't blow out, that was kind of the other risk that we had to deal with that. If you went too tight on your suit, your ass blew out. And we didn't have bench shirts, at least I didn't when I started. And the deadlift suit was pretty much just your bench singlet or your squat suit. So there were no real deadlift suits. And so the first couple of elites that I got were in that single ply gear. I didn't really even know multi-ply existed until until 91. And it was around, I didn't know, because I just kept buying the same shit. Because you'd wear one suit to train in, and then you wear a new one to compete in, then you'd use that suit that you competed in for your next training cycle and just kind of rotate that way, because nothing really lasted very long. It would stretch out and not be worth a shit. And when multi-ply came around, obviously it became easier for people to be able to get elite totals, especially when around 2002, 2001, right around that range, people started to really take time to try to master how to get more out of the gear. Before that, at least at Westside, I can't really speak for other gyms across the country, we trained in briefs, and we put the bench shirt and the squat suits and knee wraps. We only put those on when we went to the meet. I never used knee wraps when I went to Westside one single time, the whole time I was there, except for in a meet. And towards the end, we started putting the suit on a couple times, not very often. The bench shirt probably once every month towards the very end, but for the majority of the time I was there, we just put the shit on when we went to the meet. So when people started to take time, because we started to see that our 40, 60 pound carryover kind of sucked. People were getting 200 pound carryovers, so you had to figure out how to get that 200 pound carryover out of a bench shirt, because you're giving it all up. You're getting beat not because of strength, but you're getting beat because somebody's skill set's better. And I think there's some pros to that, I really do. But obviously there's and the cons are, if you don't take the time to learn the skill associated with the gear, you're gonna get beat by somebody who is not as strong as you are, but is a better geared power lifter than you are, because they took the time to learn that skill. When 2003, 2004, 2005, when those years started to come around, carryovers started to become bigger out of gear. At that point in time, maybe the elite totals should have changed. It probably should have gone up a couple hundred to accommodate for that, but it never did. And at Westside, Louis always kept it the same. Some federations have different totals, but what did change during that time were the qualifying totals for meets. So they went up, and they did institute a professional total to qualify for the bigger meets. And they were a few hundred pounds higher, but the base elite total really didn't change. And actually now it's kind of a good thing, because things have kind of folded back to where the majority of the sport now is raw. And I mean, some people are in single ply, but the vast majority is all raw right now. So these totals, these elite totals, were established with raw lifters. it just became easier to achieve when the first gear came out. And something people need to understand when it comes to the era of gear is, everything is progressive. So, I will listen sometimes to somebody complain that their record they set in single ply was beat by somebody wearing multiply. But they forget the record they set in single ply beat somebody's record that was set raw. So the advancement's always there. So, you can't sit there and say, this isn't fair because this guy beat my record because he had better gear when you beat somebody else's record because you had better gear. It's just, to me, it's insane. It doesn't make any sense. Where now that it's rotated back and it's pretty much all raw, it's the elite totals become more relative to the sport in regards to the obtainability of it. But, when the raw was raw before, the jacks were different. They didn't have the round system. You had to follow yourself. If you were at the top of a flight, the jacks, you needed to walk 5 steps just to clear the jacks. I mean, there was a lot of changes between, and so should be, between the 70s and what we have now, which makes these raw totals easier to obtain, even raw. Or the elite totals easier to obtain today raw than they were in the 70s raw. So I think it's cool the way it is. It's just keep it the same, and something has to stay the same, amongst the whole sport. So my what is the question? What is my take on it, or my perception, or how do I see it as opposed to be? I think it's a great thing because it's really the only real stable thing that's been constant throughout the whole sport. Almost everything else in the sport's changed, from the bars, to, rules, to everything except that, so that's kind of, to me, it's got some history to it and some meaning to it. So there was a time period where it was a little bit easier to obtain it. So what? It's not that big of a deal. Who it's a big deal towards is the person who's striving to get the elite or the class 2 or whatever's next on that pecking order. I think too many people for a long period of time, and this could have been because of the gear, everybody was looking straight towards the elite. When I came into the sport, it was, I want a total of class 1 so I don't have to lift in class 2 and below meets. So they should look at where they're at class-wise and then try to get into that next class. So if they're a class 3 lifter, get to class 2, then get to class 1, then get to master, then get to elite. Kind of work up the ranks that way. And from that perspective, you're working towards yourself. You're competing with yourself to try to move up a hierarchy of classifications within the sport. So I really don't have anything negative to say about that at all. You hear Louis speak about me trying to get him hurt. Well, that's true. I was trying to put that motherfucker in the hospital. He was trying to put me in the hospital.
Oh, I got one, dude. I know what the most disgusting is. Wait, hold on. I don't know if we can talk about it.